Very good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for taking your time to follow our session today. This is our second session. We had a similar session on Friday, and we're going to be continuously having this session for the next few weeks, every Tuesday and Friday. So please ensure that you have registered for this session so that you will be able to get access to the research presentation and also the recording of this session. Even if you have missed out or you're going to be missing a few of this session, as long as you have registered, we will ensure that you get access to the information. So before I go to the lesson today, let me quickly go through the overview of this session, which I did last week, but I think for the benefit for those of you who are just logged in, I'm going to repeat that first part of it. Before I start, please be informed that this session is being recorded. If you notice, your microphones are all muted. At the end of the presentation, you can raise your question by using the raise the hand option on the screen, or you can actually send a chat box message on your question. So if you raise your hand, then I will unmute you and you can ask your question directly, or you can put in your question in the chat option. So today's session, the UB Research Essentials series, is going to be facilitated by myself. I'm Vikneswaran Nair. I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies and Research at the University of the Bahamas, and also Ms. Virginia Ballance, who is based in the library. She is also the Nursing and Health Science and Graduate Studies Research Librarian. And we both are going to be managing the session today. So today's session is part of the whole program that we have structured. It's called the Research Essentials series. The aim of this session is to strengthen the knowledge and skills of all researchers at UB and also outside UB in executing good research projects and well-structured publications. This talk will also provide other essential knowledge for graduate students and researchers, namely on graduate student research supervision, managing references, and also the whole process of publication and developing your own profile in research. So this may be perfect for those students who are into research, those students who want to do their graduate studies. This may be a perfect session to give you the fundamentals for you to begin. So for the next few weeks, we're going to be running series of workshops. If you see, last week we already started on the topic, choosing the right topic and how do you prepare to structure your writing. Today's session is very much to focus on abstract, the executive summary, and also the introduction, the first part of the of your publication. And then the next few weeks, then we're going to be focusing very much on literature review, methodology, results and discussion, the conclusion, and all the other final details, which is part of the fundamentals of writing, before we move to the additional essential knowledge that is required to enhancing your research skills, which include how do you manage your research, especially if you're going to be doing your graduate studies. How do you manage research supervision? How do you manage your research referencing using Mendeley and APA? How do you manage the whole publication process and the peer review process? And also, how do you manage your research profile? So these are all critical when you want to enhance your research skills. So please do not forget to register yourself. All right, so for the session today, so today's session is very much to focus on writing the abstract and what is the difference between this abstract and executive summary, because there is some distinct difference between these two documents, and you will see that when you start writing certain publication. Some publication require an abstract, and there are some research work and publication require executive summary. So that's the first part of our session today. This first part will actually be managed by Ms. Virginia Ballance before I take you through the second portion of the session today on the introduction part of it. So without further ado, let me hand over the session to Ms. Virginia Ballance to take you through the abstract and executive summary. Over to you, Ms. Ballance.
Thank you, Vic, and welcome everybody to today's session. We're going to talk about the abstract, executive summary, and the introduction. The abstract is probably the first thing you see when you are searching for journal articles, and it's probably the first thing you read about the article after the title, obviously. And so therefore, it must be a very important part of your academic paper, and indeed it is. The abstract is one paragraph, usually, of about 150 to 250 words. Vic, I'm not seeming to be able to, oh, there we are. And it basically sums up the major aspects of your paper in a prescribed sequence. It includes the purpose of your study, states your research problem. It addresses how you approach the project, what was the basic design, in other words, the methodology. It looks at what were the findings or trends or what were the results of your research, and then briefly gives your interpretation and conclusions. Well, it looks like a mini paper, and that is indeed what it is. It's exactly a summary of the longer paper, but in about 150 to 250 words. It's important to note that abstracts differ from field to field. For instance, in the humanities, usually they launch straight into the introduction to the topic they're going to write about. Although in the information age, more and more abstracts are used in the humanities. So basically, your abstract will alert your readers to what they will expect to find in the entire paper. Next slide, please. Okay, the importance of a good abstract. The advice is to write your abstract first. And I always found that a bit shocking because I always thought you would write that last. In fact, you should write your abstract first and base it on the detailed outline that you created for writing your paper. You can always revise your abstract afterwards. And why do you do that? Because it helps you identify the problems and issues that you are studying. So you are able to distill in 1 or 2 sentences exactly what the problem is that you're going to be addressing. Another reason why your abstract needs to be very well written is that it helps editors and reviewers decide whether they want to read the entire paper. If you send it out to be peer reviewed, as a journal editor, I would send the abstract to the paper to a reviewer, and then they would get back to me whether they felt like they wanted to take on the job of peer reviewing the paper. Another reason why you should have a good abstract is because the abstract is indexed in academic databases. So if you search for a few keywords in Google Scholar or any of the EBSCO databases, tends to be, it will extract data from the abstract in addition to keywords and subject headings and that kind of thing. But certainly the abstract is an important tool used in databases for indexing and abstracting purposes. The reader, indeed, will quickly scan your abstract and decide whether or not to read the work, whether that means to download the PDF from the database, or in the event that the article is not readily available to them, to go through the effort to order the article from the library on interlibrary loan, because that's going to mean they have to wait a couple of weeks before it comes, And so the quality of the abstract that you write will determine whether or not you're going to make the effort to order the article. And then you have to be aware that sometimes researchers don't actually read the whole article, but will cite it based on reading the abstract. And that used to be more common in the days of lack of ease of transmission of articles by the internet and emails. Further, how do you know you have enough information in your abstract? So a simple thing to do is when you write your abstract, after you've written your abstract, I should say, is imagine that you are a researcher doing a study and ask yourself, if that was the only part of the paper that could be found, would you be happy with the amount of information that was available in it? Does it tell the whole story about your study? Is the purpose well explained? Are the results well explained? And if you can't get a yes from those two questions, then maybe you need to revise your abstract. So in sum, a well-written abstract can be actually the most important paragraph in your whole article. Here's an example in EBSCO of an abstract. And it looks, it's right there. And you can see I searched the word Bahamas, and everything that is in bold on this screen are words that were retrieved by the database. So out of the title, out of the subject headings, and out of the abstract. There are several types of abstracts. The most common one is the descriptive abstract, which indicates the type of information found in the publication. It doesn't evaluate or give results or conclusions. It's just an outline of the work. It's very short. And again, I should have said that abstracts depend on the field or discipline. And the informative abstract is the most common in scholarly publications. And this basically follows the structure of the paper, the reason why you did the study, the purpose, the results and evidence that you have in your paper and your results. And they usually do not extend more than 300 words. An informative variation on the informative abstract would be the structured abstract, which would then insert headings at each level. So it would say purpose and be one sentence describing the purpose. And then it would say method and describe what methodology you used. Then it would say results and give a summary of the kinds of results you got, and then discussion conclusion would sum it up. So it would have actually those words in the abstract so that the person briefly scanning your paper would be able to pick out those pieces of information quite easily. But whether they're there or not, all those pieces of information should be there. The critical abstract goes a bit further than an informative abstract. It actually makes comment about the study's validity, reliability, or completeness. And it may also include a comparison with other works on the same subject. So that would be a bit longer, up to 500 words in length. A highlight abstract would be something that you might see in a magazine. It's not a real abstract per se, and it's never used in scholarly writing, but it would just be something to, a hook to catch your interest so that you'll read the whole article. In writing abstracts, the writing style should be like an academic paper. It should be written in concise, complete sentences, get to the point, use non-evaluative language to report on the contents of the paper. It should be written in the active voice and past tense because you are reporting on research that has been completed. When you start writing, you should perhaps take whole sentences or key phrases from each section and put them in sequence. And, but don't leave it at that. You need to write an abstract, which is not just cut and paste from the main part of the paper. And before finishing, you need to go back and just evaluate that your paper and the abstract jibe, that what you say in the abstract appears in the paper, and vice versa. Further on the writing style, don't introduce your topic. That's what the introduction is for. Do not speculate what we hope to do because the paper is in the past tense. It's what you did. You do not include data. You do not have footnotes. You do not use references. You do not use quotations. And unless it's a very specific field where it's allowed, typically you do not use abbreviations. And you should try to use as many keywords as possible. And why? Because, as I said before, all these things are indexed by databases, and if you include abbreviations and footnotes, then they get picked up as well, and it would be misleading and not very helpful. So onwards to the executive summary. An executive summary is an overview of a research report or some other kind of document, not an academic paper, that summarizes its key points for its readers. One thing that's different between an abstract and an executive summary is that the executive summary is a separate stand-alone document. So the reader, who would typically not be an expert in the field, can completely understand the contents of the longer research study. Also, the reader may not have time to spend to read the entire in-depth study. So as a standalone document, it should be anything between 1 and 10 pages, depending on the length of the research document's report, the length of it, or the field of studies. So a big, long engineering document may have an executive summary of 2 pages. Business case study may have an executive summary of only 1 page. So it depends on the nature of the document and who the audience is. And unlike an executive an abstract, which you write first, the executive summary is written last. And because it's standalone, you shouldn't necessarily expect your reader to look at the full report. Other differences are between executive summary and abstract. With an research abstract, recommendations would typically not be included, but an executive summary would indicate why the research was performed, what the results are, and include the recommendations on how the findings of the research could be implemented. And as I said, they're often written for people outside of academia, whereas abstracts are written for the academic community. And also, an executive summary is often written for an audience who is not familiar with the terminology and technical jargon of that field. So when you go about to write the executive summary, first thing is to read the entire document. It's not an abstract of 300 words, but it's actually a condensed version of the entire document with a focus on recommendations. You need to isolate the major points within the document and highlight the ones which are most important for the audience. What you should include is an opening statement about why the study was done, and it should be sort of selling the report, why written in a way to capture the reader's attention. Again, following sort of like an abstract, you need to describe the purpose of the study, the method for data analysis and gathering, but not too in-depth, an overview of your findings, and then describe each recommendation accompanied by some justifications of why they were made. So a few tips for writing a good executive summary: it should not be more than 10% of the number of pages of the original. That's just a rule of thumb. It's not cast in stone. Typically anything between 1 and 10 pages, depending on the length of the report. Don't just cut and paste, paraphrase and condense the information. Consider who you're writing for. So therefore, try to avoid jargon and technical word terminology. Write clearly, because your audience is probably not an expert audience. Use strong and positive language. So to sum up, abstracts mirror the paper and address the 4 major sections in a concise way. Purpose, why you do it. Methods, how you did it. Results, what you've learned. And conclusions, what are the implications. An executive summary is a standalone document. It's a preview, if you like, of a detailed report. It's meant to give the reader, who is probably not an expert, an understanding of the topic, and it should not include a lot of jargons and abbreviation, and it should also include illustrations, graphs, and tables, if appropriate. So, thank you. I hope that was helpful. Dr. Vic?
Okay, I was having trouble unmuting myself. Okay, thank you, Ms. Ballance, for giving us an overview of the abstract and the executive summary. As what Ms. Ballance has said, it is an important document, especially the abstract, when you're doing your research paper. And quite often, even myself, I have the habit of, in fact, writing the abstract first. I know it's not usual, and people say that you do the abstract the last, but I always like to start with an abstract to frame myself how I'm going to execute this publication. Of course, the abstract is something that is work in progress. We keep tweaking the abstract as we complete the study. But by writing the abstract first, you have an idea how you want to structure this publication. So I have a habit of actually putting the abstract first. We'll come back to our questions at the end of the session. So let me now continue the discussion on the second part of it, which is to focus on the introduction. So if you look at the introduction part of any publication is important, as you can put off the reader if the introduction is badly written. The introduction will lead the reader from a general subject area to a particular field of research. The introduction will contextualize the research in terms of the background, the research problem and objectives, the rationale, the methods, the potential outcome, and also the whole structure of the paper. Introduction is really like a mental roadmap of the publication that allows a reader to be clear what they are studying, why is it important, what are the gaps in the knowledge, and how the study will advance the knowledge. As I've said, intro gives the reader the first impression. So it is critical that the intro is well structured and well organized. If a reader gets put off by the introduction, he's not going to read your paper. So as a reader, and if you look at the current norm that we are in, we have access to a lot of digital data. So we want to decide if a publication is suitable for me to read through or to be used for my study. Prepare the introduction like a funnel or an inverted triangle information from a more general aspect of the topic, and then slowly you narrow it down to be more specific. When you structure your intro, there are normally 4 phases that you may adopt. Firstly, establish an area to research. Why is this topic important? Why do you need to focus on this area? Number 2, identify a research niche. When I say research niche here is, what are the gaps? What are the research questions that you are trying to address in this study? And then place your research within the research niche. This is where you set your objectives, your scope, the boundaries of this study, what is the expected outcome, and how are you going to structure this paper. So normally in most publication, including for those of you who are writing your dissertation or thesis at the graduate level or even at the undergraduate level, project papers, introduction is normally written the last or written one of the late document that you actually write, because introduction needs to match with the overall structure of your paper. Every part of the paper will actually appear in part of your introduction. So it's always good to write the introduction the last or review it every now and then as you progress with your publication. In the introduction, the scope of the study or the boundaries of the study must be decided. What is included and what is excluded, why an alternative was rejected must be determined. Choice of research problem must be decided as well. Delimiting choices can be done via the aims and objectives that you set, the research questions, the variable of interest that you're using for the study, the methodology that you have used, the theoretical framework that you have adopted or adapted for the study. So all this can be decided. So be clear what is the boundary of the study in the introduction. Remember, delimitation is not the same as limitation of the study. Limitation of the study is normally you do after the completion of the study, whereas delimitation is basically putting a scope, what your study will cover and what your study is not going to cover. When you look at the flow, the narrative flow of writing an introduction, to keep the interest of the reader, ensure the narrative flow in your introduction is intact. Clearly identify the subject area of interest using keywords from the title. So the title is key. Then give a brief review of pertinent published literature. Remember, your introduction is not your literature review. So don't forget that. Most people sometimes tend to overdo in the introduction by putting in all the literature into the introduction. What is the hypothesis that you are investigating? Use past tense when you write this. Rationale of the research study and the design. So these are critical things that you must put in your introduction. Remember, the introduction is important to make readers keen to read your work. So depending on the publication, so it very much differs from one publication to another, how you structure the introduction. Tell a compelling story. Use strong quotes, thought-provoking quotes, and describe some puzzling scenarios that you want to highlight to the reader. Cite good case studies to or look at some of the research problem that is critical that you think can relate to your study. So these are important things that you may want to put in the introduction in order to get the reader to be engaged to continue studying your publication. Now let us look at some of the details in the introduction now. Firstly, the background information. So normally background information is included in the introduction. Start by looking at how the research problem evolved, supported by literature. So it is not plucked from the air, but it has to be backed by literature review. By looking at the evolution, the root problem, scope and gaps can be determined. But also remember, as what I've said, introduction is not the same as literature review. So the introduction places the research problem in proper context rather than thoroughly examining the pertinent literature. I've included further information in writing the background information within this presentation. So when you completed this session, there are more information that you can run through in the slides when you get the copy of the slides later. Next, writing your research question or your problem, research problem. As stated here, if you look at the first bullet, research question is a statement about an area of concern, a condition to be improved, a difficulty to be eliminated, or a troubling question that exists in scholarly literature, in theory, or in practice that points to the need for meaningful understanding and deliberate investigation. So it can be a statement or in the form of a question. You do not need to answer or state how to respond to the statement in the introduction. Research question is important as it will guide you throughout the study or publication. But research question and problem statement is not the same. A research problem or some kind of problem statement identifies the need of something. It indicates the absence of a value or presence of something problematic. It is a definite or clear expression or a statement about a concern, a condition to be improved, or a difficulty to be eliminated. So a research problem can relate to a specific topic or opportunity. For example, the issue of climate change as a problem statement or as a problem that you want to study on. The researcher creates questions based on their knowledge and background of the area under study mentioned in the problem statement. When creating a research question, it is always important to link the problem with the question in a manner that clearly states the need of the research to be undertaken. So a research question provides an area to focus on regarding a research problem. For example, for the case in climate change, so the research question can be, how do ozone levels impact global temperature level? So that's how you structure it. The purpose of research problem or question is to introduce the reader to the importance of the topic being studied and orientate to the significance of the study and the research questions. So place the problem into a particular context and provide the framework for the study. So the best way to test your research problem is by simply asking the so what question. Answering the so what question requires that you have thought about its significance. So keep asking so what. When you have a question, ask so what. And you will reach a point where that is exactly what I want to study on. And it allows you to become more clear and precise when you decide on the question that you are trying to investigate. So to identify the how, when, who, what, and where of a problem, you can consider the following sources when you're doing your research, when you're doing your reading, especially when you start looking at your literature review. Deduction from theory. What are the various theory that has come up on the particular study? What are the other disciplinary perspective of the same field? What are the thoughts coming from researchers, practitioners, the industry practitioners? What is your own personal experience on this area? And what is the literature basically telling? All this will actually allow you to structure a good problem statement. So use the funnel approach that I mentioned to you earlier when formulating a good research statement or question. Go from broad to narrow. It must be compelling, support multiple perspective, and it must be something that is researchable. Okay, so you don't want to do a research or publication that looks nice, but it is not researchable. So do not confuse, at the same time, do not confuse a research topic with research problem. Okay, topic is something to read and obtain information about, whereas a problem is something that you want to solve or frame as a question that must be answered at the end of the study as you complete the whole study and the publication. Do take note of what we call the circular reasoning. This is important. Don't state the research problem as simply the absence of the thing you are suggesting. If you look at the example that I've put here, if you propose the problem in this community is that it has no hospital, this only leads to a research problem where the need is for a hospital, the objective is to create a hospital, the method is to plan for building a hospital, and the evaluation is to measure if there is a hospital or not. So if you do a so what test that I mentioned to you earlier, it will fail and it will not reveal the relevance of the problem you are trying to investigate. So take note of that. In the introduction, you will also introduce the theoretical framework that will be supporting the studies. The details may be captured in the literature review, but you can introduce it in the introduction. The theory supporting the study is important in all research. The theoretical framework will give you the structure to support a theory of a research study and describes why the research problem under the study exists in the first place. By having a theoretical framework, it will certainly strengthen the study, as you can evaluate your study more critically. You can connect your study to existing knowledge, guided by, of course, the relevant theory, hypothesis, and research methods. You can it will also force you to address questions of the why and how. The research framework, the theoretical framework will also identify the limits of your study. How much can you generalize? And what are the specific variables that can influence the study? It fulfills one primary purpose: to explain the actual meaning, nature, and challenges of a phenomenon that is being studied. So that is what a framework basically does. Some of the strategies to develop an effective framework is outlined here. So these are quite straightforward. First one, to examine your title and your research problem. So by having a good title and research problem, you are able to effectively come up with a framework that supports this problem. Brainstorm on what you consider to be the key variables, and this is how you do is by looking at your related literature, okay, the relevant literature and the latest literature, not the obsolete literature. List the construct that is required for your study and the variables that you need to study on. Review the key theories. So if you're doing a social science research, of course, the social science theory becomes critical. So if you're in any other field, there are supporting theories to support your respective field. Discuss the assumption or propositions of this theory as part of your introduction. So in short, to conclude, at the end, your introduction is important because it is able to give the first impression of the publication. And your introduction by outlining the structure of the publication or the study, which is going to be the roadmap of your publication. The final paragraph or sentences of your introduction should focus your main argument and conclusion and provide a brief description of the rest of the paper that lets the reader know where you are going and what you can expect to get from this publication. A roadmap is important because it helps the reader place the research problem within the context of their own perspective about the topic. In addition, concluding your introduction with an explicit roadmap tells the reader that you have a clear understanding of the structural purpose of your paper. In this way, the roadmap acts as a type of promise to yourself and to your readers. So it's not just for the reader, but also to yourself, that you will follow a consistent and coherent approach to addressing the topic of inquiry. So refer to it often, to make changes to it regularly, to help keep you writing focused and organized. So this is critical. So that is quickly to give you an overview of an introduction. When you get the chance to read through these slides, we have given you a lot of resources with the hyperlinks. So we will give you access to this. As long as you have registered, you will get access to all this publication and also the recording of the session today. So we have a lot of resources from UB libraries that you can get access to. So that is giving you a quick overview of the introduction, the abstract, and the executive summary. So now I would like to open the floor for any questions. Let me just firstly look at the chat forum if there's any questions here. There's one feedback here from Dominic Bain. During my time at UB writing papers, I only remember seeing articles with abstract. Is that because abstracts are easier to write than executive summary? What type of researchers will I normally find in for executive summary? Miss Ballance, do you have a response for that? Miss Ballance, are you around?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vic. Dominique, you probably only saw abstracts because they were written for academic papers. You would find an executive summary for a report, typically. For example, at the university, we receive reports from international organizations that are 50, 80, 130 pages long reports. And they will always publish a separate standalone executive summary to that report. So they tend not to be used, found in academic databases, but they're more used in industry and when there is a very long report. Government documents, for example, or big government studies would include an executive report. Is that helpful? Oh, there's a dog.
I see a lot of questions asking about the slides. Yes, we will make accessible all the presentation today, the slide and also the recording of the session. As long as you have registered, I see some of them say you have not received it from the earlier session. So we will run through the database of those who have registered and send you the link of all the presentation of last week, this week, the recording of last week, and also this week. So you are free to access it and pause wherever that you need to pause during the recorded video. any question, you're free to even ask by raising your hand, and I can unmute you and you can ask directly, or you can actually post your question in the chat forum.
Dr. Vic, I see a question here from Crystal Lotmore about the abstract.
Okay. Yep.
That exclude data. Yes, you do not give the data that you collected in the abstract. Remember, you only have 150 to 200 words for an abstract, so you can't include the results like you would in the paper. So you would just give a brief statement about what you collected and what their significance is.
You can include sometimes in the abstract the main findings, the main outcome of the study can still be described if you have the word count in the study, but you don't provide the details of your findings in the abstract. Remember, the abstract is going to lead the researcher to read your full article. So you do not have that space provided. In some abstracts, they allow a bit more space, but in most abstracts, you don't have that luxury of space. So you do not have space to actually put in the details. You can put some of the main findings in the abstract, so that will lead the researcher to investigate further by reading your article. Okay, you have a raised hand from John. Okay, let me unmute you. Yes, John.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My question has to do, with the keywords. Apart from my title, where else would I be getting my words for the abstract?
Oh, that's a good question, John. Thank you. You want to choose keywords that are unique to the topic of your paper. So the example I have is kind of macabre. Let's say you're writing an article for a palliative care journal. You don't want to just say the keyword of your paper is palliative care, but some aspect of the topic. I would look at the articles which you used for your paper and see what keywords those authors used to give you some idea of what to use. That's how I would start. Yes,
you're right. The keyword does not always mean that you're extracting only from the abstract. The keyword is actually running across the whole paper, and your main aim of having this keyword is you want to ensure that when someone searches for your paper, it's going to come to your paper. So what are the critical terminology that is being used in the paper? It may not appear in the abstract, but it is appearing somewhere in your publication, and you want that keyword to be related to your publication. So that's when you use the keyword. Most articles, I think they will require about six to seven keywords that you want to include. So the title is important, your abstract is important, and the keywords are important if you want to direct the researcher to your article when they do a search. There's a comment here by Jane Joseph. Abstract is only used for academic papers, and executive summary is mostly used for reports, government, and business. Yeah, you're right. If you look at abstract, most academic papers will actually use abstract, and most industry report, government reports, consultancy report, they will always start with an executive summary. So that's how it is normally used. So executive summary, as what Ms. Ballance said, it's a standalone document where all the essence of the whole study is in the executive summary. So the details are in the actual study, but the executive summary sometimes can even be 10 pages long. So if you have a very huge proposal or huge a consultancy project, you may get almost 8 to 10 pages long executive summary. And there are some people who just read the executive summary to make certain decision. Further comment here, it was said that the literature review should be separate from the introduction. does this apply across all research paper, or is this specific to certain discipline? When I say the literature review should be separate, there is a separate heading on literature review. But yes, if you look at some journals, there is no literature review. They have an introduction, and your literature review goes as part of the introduction. So it depends on the publication. In some publication, they do allow a heading called literature review. If there's a heading called literature review, then you do not include then you do not need to include substantial literature review in the introduction. But if you do not have, like in many journals, they have an introduction, and all the literature building towards the study is parked in the introduction. They have an introduction, and then they go straight to the research method. So it depends on publication to another. Is there anything else that you want to add, Ms. Ballance?
No, that's fine. Yeah, the literature review is sometimes subsumed in the introduction, and then sometimes it's a separate section. It really depends on what you're writing. I think a lot of student papers have a separate section called literature review, and that is to demonstrate that you did do the literature review.
Yeah. There's a comment here from Shirley Curtis. The theoretical framework can be used in your keywords as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed.
The name of the framework you use should be a keyword.
Yes. Especially if you're using something that is unique and you want, and if you see, if you're a researcher, sometimes you search based on certain framework, certain theories. And if that theory is appearing in your keyword, it makes it easy for people to direct their search towards your publication. So it is important
to find it immediately. That's exactly why.
Yep, exactly.
That's why we like keywords.
Okay, any more questions before we come to the end of this session? Remember, we have another session this Friday, so don't forget, every Tuesday and Friday from 12:30 to 1:30, we have blocked this time. So you're free to log in once you have registered. Now that you have registered, so we have your email, so we will at least send you all the details for the next session and even the sessions today. Okay, there's no more further questions. So with that, once again, I would like to thank all of you for coming into the session today. Thank you to Ms. Virginia Ballance as well for continuously supporting these research sessions that we've been having since middle of last year. We've been continuously having this session, and we hope to conclude this series by mid-June and start a fresh new research workshops series with further new topics in fall. So if you have registered, you will notice at the end of the registration form, I've put up a question and asking you, is there any other areas that you want us to focus on, or you think there's a lack of information and you need some help on? And then if there's a lot of needs in the same area, we will be able to structure something along those lines. Even if we do not have the expertise, we will find another expert to come to tackle a particular methodology maybe that you want us to focus on. Then we can actually organize a more directed session. So once again, thank you to everyone for coming in. Any last word, Ms. Ballance?
No, that's fine. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. These are trying times, but this is a little bright light, and it's fun to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you all. And John, yes, I saw your comment, the process of the research. Yes, I think there's one of the sessions that have been scheduled as well. Whole process of research and peer reviewing process that we will be discussing in one of the sessions soon. All right then, so I will see you soon. I see all your comments. I will take note of the areas that you want us to focus on. We will, as we progress through this session. So do stay in touch. Do dial in whenever you can. So take care and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.